I will put it. I will put it in content so we can exchange through WhatsApp or something.
That would be great.
I don't understand. He gives me signs.
God, look at all those people. With that many people,
a countdown.
you probably have enough time for a sentence each.
But it is not good. We cannot see these people.
Yeah, no, we can't see that. We have to turn around. You guys are sitting in the right place.
Moving.
Yeah, we all
Because those are too far away.
Ah, okay.
You can see it.
I can't get on touch the Zoom.
Okay. But that, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Email, it doesn't come.
I can still hear music, am I?
I want to be able to see everybody who's attending virtually
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
several times.
It's all a bit complicated here. We have to put our headsets on, and we're on channel 4. So,
Five.
oh, sorry, channel 5. Yes, we're in room 5. So. Anyway, welcome, everyone. And to the technician, can you stop the background music, please? I don't know what's...
Background music is on 4.
Got it? Okay, I was on the wrong channel.
Maybe it's
Why is everybody so amused?
Well, it's very complicated, yes. And we're not young people anymore. We're
Yes.
celebrating the 20-year anniversary of the working group
right,
on
this is a
internet
geriatric
governance. And whatever you say, you can hear it because the microphones are on permanently. So if you have any side conversations, we can hear it. Anyway, it's a great pleasure to have you all here. So it's a class reunion to celebrate the 20th anniversary. We're all still walking, nobody in a wheelchair yet. And as somebody said, maybe we have to ask for a doctor to be in the room just in case. Be that as it may, I took the liberty of using my AI assistant I have on my phone to ask, does WGIG matter? And I say it's a difficult question, and the answers are yes and no, but in conclusion, it says the WGIG plays a role in the development and promotion of internet governance and may have less impact than some would have desired. This is sort of a kind of wishy-washy intelligence, I would have thought. We were part of the process. We actually thought we had a tremendous impact. It was a bit of a game changer in the WSIS process, which before was very much government only, and we really opened the doors to a multi-stakeholder participation. And we thought, okay, let's look back a bit and also look forward a bit. And we decided to have it in 3 segments. And when I say we, it was mainly Bill who put it together. Have 1 segment on the nature of internet governance, 1 segment on multi-stakeholder and multilateral, which is seen by some as an antagonistic situation. And then the last segment, the IGF, looking forward, the future of the IGF. Does the IGF live up to expectation? What should change, what not? And with that, I hand over to Bill, who provides some framing of the session. Please, Bill.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marcus, and hello, everybody. I'm going to take my headphones off so I don't hear myself. Well, I thank you all for coming, first of all, because there's a lot going on at the same time. We're here not because we think that the WGIG report that was put out was a source of Talmudic wisdom for the ages, that we solved all the problems of the universe or anything like that. It was a negotiated document under very intense kind of conditions, etc. However, there was a lot of impact, I think, on the process, and that's been lasting, and I think it's worth taking note of that. Since this is the 20th anniversary of the WSIS, how could we not talk about the 20th anniversary of the WGIG, which played an important role in bringing the WSIS to a successful conclusion? So that's why I thought it would be useful to get the band back together again and do this. So I'm just going to make a few points about the impact of the WSIS, and that's based in part on, we did 2 books together. Aside from the reports that were put out, members of the group got together and contributed chapters to 2 books that I edited, one in 2005 and the other in 2015 on the 10th anniversary. And in those books, I had chapters about why WGIG mattered, and I'm going to kind of just run through a couple of points to try to level set us to get everybody on the same page, because frankly, at this point, I don't know how many people even remember the WGIG. I talked to people at the party last night, and a lot of people were like, you know, I come to IGF, I don't really know where the IGF came from. I don't know what, you know, I mean, a lot of this history has just gone dark as we've all gotten older and new people have cycled in, et cetera. So I think it's good to try to level set us by getting us on the same page and say, what was this thing, et cetera. So I'm just going to make 3 points about the procedural and institutional contributions, and then a couple of points about the substantive contributions, and then we'll go to inclusive discussion with all the people that are here as well as the ones who are online. So I would start by saying that the WGIG demonstrated the benefits of multi-stakeholder cooperation in the United Nations in a way that really hadn't been seen before in the internet governance space. For those who are old and were around during the WSIS process, you may remember in the early stages of the process, stakeholders were being locked out of rooms, thrown out of rooms, told not to speak. The whole thing was a kind of a mess for a long time. It took a while for the whole multi-stakeholder thing ethos to start to kick in. The WGIG contributed, I think, substantially to legitimating that and showing that, in fact, multi-stakeholder collaboration could be effective, problem-solving, and that, indeed, stakeholders could make real contributions to the kind of procedural and substantive learning that everybody was doing as we came together and groped towards some shared understandings of things. Secondly, I'd say that the WGIG facilitated the WSIS negotiations. For those of you, again, who are around, you might remember that for the first couple of years in the Geneva cycle, people were saying the conversation's all over the place, we don't know what's going on, it's not cumulative, we're going nowhere, et cetera, et cetera. The WGIG actually did a kind of systematic mapping and brought order to the discussion, worked through issues at a kind of structured and deliberate and methodical basis that kind of laid out the main issues at stake in a way that everybody could understand. The WGIG promoted public engagement. We did a lot of innovative things that now we take for granted, but back then were new in terms of having public comments, having open, transparent processes, having everything on the web, having simultaneous translation in the sessions, et cetera, et cetera. All of that stuff that the IGF now does, back then it was all new in the United Nations context. In terms of substantive contributions, the WGIG played a major role, I think, in demystifying the nature and scope of internet governance. There was a lot of debate, you might remember back then, about is there such a thing as internet governance? Does the term even make sense? Or else you had people who said, well, if there is internet governance, it just meant what ICANN does, or it just means what intergovernmental agencies like the ITU should be doing, et cetera. And we were able to sort of work through this concept and sort of demonstrate that governance does not mean government, right? That we needed a holistic, broad approach to internet governance that took into account not just the underlying infrastructure, but also the use of the internet and the rule systems that apply to privacy, digital trade, intellectual property, and so on transactions going over the internet, et cetera. We developed a working definition, which was drawn from the political science literature on international regimes, as it happens, that set out who does internet governance, what does internet governance consist of, and where is it done, et cetera. All that was important. And we kind of took the attention off the whole debate that was going on at the time about how the ITU might take over ICANN and so on. In fact, we kind of decentered the ITU and that controversy completely by taking this broad kind of approach, which I think was good. Fifth, we began the holistic analysis of a broad range of issues. In light of that broad definition, we mapped out all the different issues that are part of the internet governance ecosystem and galaxy and clustered them and made them a little bit more tractable in terms of discussions. We had a process where colleagues put out different visions for oversight of internet governance, of critical internet resources. This was the first chance for people to put forward alternatives to the ITU as an intergovernmental solution. People came up, various government members came up with proposals for a global internet council, an intergovernmental global internet policy council, all kinds of new types of things. None of these were agreed as a group, but they were simply listed for people's information, and that helped shape the discussion going forward about enhanced cooperation and things like that. So that was, I think, probably useful in advancing the discussion. And of course, most importantly, from the standpoint of this group, the WIGIG proposed the creation of an Internet Governance Forum to continue the dialogue, to help to solve the deadlocks that were occurring around internet governance, to say, let's have a permanent space attached to the United Nations where we can continue to have this open discussion without the pressure of negotiating outcomes and so on. So those were 7 ways in which the WIGIG, I think, made a meaningful, impactful contribution to the conclusion of the WSIS process, but also helped lay the foundation for everything that's gone on in the years subsequent. So that's just a little background to refresh us for those who haven't thought about the WIGIG in 20 years. And now what we're going to do is go through 3 forward-looking questions, asking colleagues to think about how we think about some of the contemporary problems from the perspective of what we did together 20 years ago. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And at a more basic level, I would say the WIGIG report found its way into the final outcome of the WSIS, of the Tunis agenda. There is a chapter on internet governance, which is more or less taken verbatim from the WIGIG report. So that is, I think, a significant impact of WIGIG that we actually managed to feed into the process. And also, for those who attended the summits, there was a significant difference between the Geneva phase and the Tunis phase. The Tunis phase was by far more open in terms of procedure, when in Geneva, the CEO of ICANN was kicked out of the room. I chaired then a small negotiating group, and some government said, hey, this guy is not government, he needs to be taken out. Whereas in Tunis, their ICANN community was present, the chair of ICANN was sometimes, or the CEO was sometimes asked for his comments or opinion on some of the items, and that was also an indirect impact of WIGIG. It would not have happened without WIGIG. But with that, we come now to the first chapter, the nature of internet governance, and I have 3 members of the old WIGIG group listed as contributors, Aisha, Raul, and Wolfgang, but others feel free to chime in. And we will also open to the other participants to come in after the first segment. But can I maybe invite Aisha Hassan, who was at the time the voice of business, so to speak. You were the representative of ICC, and people listened to what you had to say. Over to you, Aisha.
Thank you, Marcus. Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and it was a pleasure to serve on the working group on internet governance. Yes, at the time I was the representative for the International Chamber of Commerce and what was the umbrella for global business, the Coordinating Committee of Business Interlocutors, CCBI. Yes, we've come a long way, but I think that the definition has stood the test of time. I think it's still valid. I think that it has been nicely shaped so that it has adapted. In terms of the nature of internet governance today, I think that it has expanded in the sense that many emerging technologies or applications that we have today didn't exist at the time. But that is part of what we're talking about now in terms of internet governance, whether it's AI governance or other technologies. So I think that the discussion that we started 20 years ago is now at a place where we want to keep looking to having adaptable ways to address these issues. And one of the things that the WIGIG really did, in my view, was to foster collaborative relationships and the idea of cooperating and discussing things across the stakeholder groups, which really didn't exist before. And I just want to take a moment to share one little anecdote. At the time, I was global business, and at one point, our esteemed chairman, Nitin Desai, laughed and he said, "Oh my God, do I hear Cuba and global business agreeing?" And here's my comrade next to me today. Yes, we learned to talk to each other, and I think that that has lasted over the years and been fostered by the IGF itself, giving everybody an opportunity to talk with people that they may not have the chance to have a coffee and truly exchange with. And I purposely am emphasizing this because that is an asset. And I think that's part of what the WIGIG started and the IGF has continued to foster. So I'll stop with that at this point.
Thank you, Aisha, for that. And I think anecdotes are always good to enliven the debate a bit or the discussion. And it's great history. Raul, can you come in?
Yes, thank you very much, Marcus. It's very nice to be here with all of you today, 20 years later. I don't know why the rest of the people look 20 years older, not myself. I don't know what happened with the rest of the people. WIGIG was a really innovative experience and an innovative way to address the difficulties that have presented during the first phase of the summit. As Marcus said, that it was very different. The first and the second phases of the summit were very different. It was an achievement itself. The WIGIG, as Ayesha also pointed out, it was we all of us learned about how to work better with the other stakeholders, and it was very helpful to have an informed discussion in Tunis. I remember just also bringing an anecdote that there were a lot of discussions in the WIGIG about who managed the root server A, and some of us were trying to explain to the rest of to other people that the root server A was not important. That's so I say no, because why you question what we are our positions? No, I'm not questioning your positions. What we are saying here is that the problem is not root server A. The problem is more complex. So that's the discussion, the level of discussion in 2005 was very different than 2003. I think that one of the things that one of the important outcomes of the WIGIG was also that we strengthened the concept of multi-stakeholderism, and is when we look nowadays the organizations and the forums that are involved in different ways in the governance of internet. Not all of them are pure multi-stakeholder models, but all of them or most of them are open to the participation of all stakeholders. And this is important because we consolidated the idea that the participation of all stakeholders is crucial, is important, and is very important still today. And those things that sometimes we take as for granted are not. With all the geopolitical changes that we are seeing around the world, that's the things that we assume that were discussions from the past probably will come back to the table in the near future. And so it is important that we continue as reinforcing that idea that the participation of all stakeholders is crucial, and that we need, in a very changing world, we need to be more efficient in the development of digital policies. To be more efficient, to have the right policies on time, we need the participation of everybody from the inception of the processes, from the origin of the discussions. So I think those lessons that we learned in WIGIG 20 years ago remain very important, valid. I would not say just valid, that's crucial for the future of the governance of the digital governance in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raoul. And over to Wolfgang.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was a member of the WICIC on behalf of civil society and the academic community, and Juan was from the government, Aisha from the business, and Raoul from the technical community. It demonstrates already that there was a unique culture of collaboration by trying to promote the understanding, because I also will start with an anecdote. Because originally, internet governance was not an issue for the WSIS in the mandate from the UN General Assembly in 2001. So in the process of the second PrepCom, so some people raised the issue of internet, and then we had an intersessional meeting in Paris, and this was in a night meeting in the cellar, and it was unclear whether non-governmental people can join this working group 5. Now we are in the workshop room 5. So it was a new working group 5 because we had 4 different working groups, and there was no control on the entrance. So that means a lot of non-state actors moved into the room, and then a debate started, and somebody talked about IP addresses, and then the ambassador from a country, I will not name the country, said, what is this, an IP address? Because there was only little knowledge about governments at this time. And then Paul Wilson from APNIC stepped in and explained, you know, how IP addresses and domain names are functioning. And then the ambassador, oh, this was very helpful. Thank you very much. And I think this was the start of the mutual recognition that every stakeholder can bring a different expertise to the table. And but from Paris, it was in July 2003 to December 2003. The understanding of the complexity was still on a low level. So that means even people did not understand what we are talking about. That's why the WICIC got the mandate to define what internet governance is. So it had not only the mandate to work on recommendations, but also to give a definition. And I think this definition is, the discussion around this definition is really crucial. And Bill mentioned that already. When we worked on the definition, we had 2 options at the end of the day. A narrow definition, just to concentrate on the critical internet resources, names and numbers, or a broad definition. And confronted with the complexity of the mandate also of the WSIS, we decided in favor of the broad definition, and this is what Bill said also on who and what and how. So, and these are the 3 elements which are defined in these 3 lines of the paragraph in the Tunis agenda, which says, okay, it has to be, all stakeholders has to be involved in their respective roles. I was fighting until the very last moment to add on equal footing, but Anita then said, okay, respective roles include in a certain way that everybody is equal in their respective role. So, but anyhow, this was the first element. All stakeholders has to be involved. The second was, you know, sharing on norms, principles, and even decision-making procedures. That is the collaborative approach. And the third part was that we differentiated between the evolution and the use of the internet, so the technical and the political layer. And this was the holistic approach. And if I take these 3 basic elements of the definition, the multi-stakeholder approach, the collaborative approach, and the holistic approach, then I think that this definition is really universal and can be used for all governance aspects which we're discussing today, 20 years later. Because 20 years ago, internet governance was the term which covered all the things. But since that, we have seen, you know, a lot of new language appearing around governance. We have digital governance, ICT governance, cyber governance, then governance of the Internet of Things, IoT governance, and now we are talking about AI governance. And I'm asking myself, you know, what is the difference between AI governance and Internet and the broad definition of Internet governance if you just take these three approaches. So AI governance has to be multi-stakeholder. AI governance has to be collaborative. And without a holistic approach, you will fail to find any sustainable solutions for AI. That means you have to take into consideration also in AI governance the technical elements and the public policy implications. And insofar, the confusion we had 20 years ago around internet governance sometimes reappear as confusion about AI governance, but it's rather simple. Go back to what we have produced 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Wolfgang. And yes, we also, the Tunis agenda has a whole chapter on internet governance with some explanatory paragraphs, and they make it clear that anything related to the use and abuse of the internet is part of internet governance. And all these applications you mentioned, AI and whatever, they rely on the internet. Without the internet, digital without the internet, it's not just about the standalone computer, it's about connecting the computers. But I would like to invite other WIGIG members, old WIGIG members, if they would like to add anything, but also open the floor to other participants if you have comments or questions. Juan, you would like to come in, please?
Yes. Yes. Well, good morning. I'm not going to talk about the substantial achievements of the IGF because of the WIGI, because it was just mentioned, the working definition and the rest of the mandate. I want to talk about some achievement of the methodology, because to ask a group of persons, intelligent group of persons that have different viewpoints to agree in a very contentious subject, it seems like being crazy, because, well, if you have people that have similar opinions, that's okay, but to have 30 people with different opinions to get to the results, it is a challenge. And it was done. And I'm going to share with you how methodology it was done, because I think it's useful for many discussions that are being carried out now. And also it has been applied in some other forums in which I participated. The first thing is that throughout the year that we were working, we had a lot of opinions. I think Bill mentioned all that opinions, and it was all collected in a very big document. And then at the end, because we had to have a report, we were placed into a chateau, and they throw out the key, and you don't get out until you have a report. But we have very, very large material that will be very impossible to collate. So the first decision is that we will have two reports. We will have a big report in which all the opinions will be collected. It necessarily is not a consensus report. It's a sort of compendium. And it was mentioned that has been very useful because many interesting ideas was there that then people can take it out and materialize it later. And then to concentrate in the actual report. And of course, then we have a lot of things in which we had consensus, and we put it there. We discussed the definition, as Wolfgang just said, with some tweaks there. But in the end, there were the recommendations of the, how it's called, the arrangements for the government. There was no consensus in a final one. And so we decided that we will try to narrow down the different proposals to the bare basics, and we finally ended with 4 different ones. And I think this is a contribution of this report, and it's a methodology that can be used in some discussions that we're going to have now, for instance, in data governance and some other, that whenever we don't have to get to one final consensus, because maybe that's impossible. But if we can narrow down and put the basic alternatives as part of the final report, that is a result. Because otherwise, you can say, okay, we don't have consensus, so we don't have result. And that's zero. And so think that this opens the way to very contentious issues that it's been discussed today, to open the way to have results that could be actionable and that can really contribute. So I think Marcus and Bill and my colleagues, I think that that's what's one of the contributions that we made. And I think we had no choice, because otherwise we'll still be in the chateau 20 years after, trying to get one only answer. Thank you.
But
Thank you.
it was very good wine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
Marcus.
I could live there.
Marcus.
Okay, Jovan.
Thank you. Just a quick note on this point, which I think Bill and Juan brought. At that time, you had a feeling that your input was taken care of. It was not accepted verbatim, but you had a feeling that it was provided. What is the major problem today is that we have so many processes which call you to have your say, make contribution, and your contribution disappears in some sort of a governance Bermuda Triangle. And you just come with some document and say, okay, it's fine if somebody says, okay, we disagree, we cannot accept that, there is a consensus, but this is a huge problem. And some good news is ideally we should be locked in some sort of secluded place and negotiate, as Marcus did really as a big master of diplomacy. But nowadays we have also AI that can help us. AI can trace our contribution to the final document. Is your contribution reflected in final document or completely ignored? It's not ideal. I prefer human approach, but this is one great lesson, I would say, from WGIG and overall IGF process. When somebody asks you to have your say, to contribute, there is some sort of reflection. Roger, disagree, agree, let's discuss it, whatever. I'm afraid that this is missing now in global governance in general, and I would say also in AI and digital governance.
Amen.
Thank you, Jovan. And I think in the interest of time, we have to move on. And I encourage the next speakers to be as concise and compact as possible. So we go to the multilateral versus multi-stakeholder. And the first speaker is Alejandro Pisanti. He's joining us remotely. Alejandro, are you on?
Yes, I am on. Can you hear me?
Excellent. We can hear you. Welcome.
Hi, it's 3 a.m. in Mexico City. Cheers, everybody. 3:20. Thanks for the invitation and for the first round. It's very useful. One of the things that happens and it's a bit of a paradox, as Jovan has said, we had the ears of the governments and decision makers at the UN structurally, because this was the outcome, and we was part of the process to produce an outcome for WSIS, the World Summit of the Information Society, which had been agreed to take place by an agreement of the UN General Assembly. So that's something that we're not having as often here now. And processes like the GDC seem to have been, the Global Digital Compact, seem to have been designed in order to make it much harder for voices like would have been the WGIG to make even a dent on decisions that have already been made by the Secretary General and his adjunct and a few influential governments. Multilateral versus multi-stakeholder, we have to, I'm convinced that all problems of internet governance and many others are much better solved by multi-stakeholder mechanisms. The weights of the stakeholders have to be different. The institutional and organizational design are key. We have to be able to, let's say, involve governments decisively when things are involving law enforcement, for example. So the even if the involvement is informal, it has to be very enabling, as happens in the anti-phishing working group or as it's happening in the upcoming Global Anti-Scam Alliance. And in other places, the governments really have themselves decided to sit in the second row. That happened to us when we were doing the ICANN reform process around 2001, 2003. The governments were offered seats to study, at least seats at the table on the board, and they had very good reasons not to do that. One of them was legal, that they would have to join the liabilities of the corporation as governments, and the other one is that they would never come together to decide who were 5 representatives or even 3 representatives as one vote. What we have learned from this multi-stakeholder processes also is how different stakeholders perceive what is important, what is decisive, and what's actually pretty standard. As you know, I have a scheme for translating things like, for example, using identity, the mass scale of the internet, cross jurisdictions, lowering barriers, lowering friction, and managing memory and forgetting, to understand what problems are actually not a problem created by the internet, but modified, disrupted, if you want. And in some of these cases, you actually do need a more multilateral layer in the solution of a fully multi-stakeholder problem. Consequences of choosing multi-stakeholder or multilateral, well, is the internet more free in the countries that propose multilateral? That's probably the acid test of why we actually need to keep pushing for multi-stakeholder, because every single country that pushes for more multilateral is also pushing against internet freedom. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alejandro, and thank you for joining us at the ungodly hour in your country. That's very much appreciated.
Love you so much, man. So.
And we have Avri as a speaker on these issues. Please, Avri.
Okay, thank you. I actually very much like this subject of multi-stakeholder and multilateral as opposed to multi-stakeholder versus. I think at the moment in this point in history, they both have to coexist. And in fact, we've seen that. We see that with examples like the ICANN example. We see that with examples like the Sao Paulo guidelines, which basically finally talk about how we can bring the two together. Now, there was a wonderful part of WGIG where we're actually, I think it's the last time we actually participated as equals. And that's one of the things that I've looked for since then. WGIG truly was, I was able to sit there and argue for hours against some of the roles and responsibilities as believed by governments. And until Neaton got tired of it, it was allowed to go on. And that is important. That is something that does not happen at the moment, because even in our multi-stakeholder models, even in something as vaunted as the IGF that grew out of WGIG, it's a top-down. There is an authority that we all answer to in some way. We all appeal to. We all have to go to. So the multi-stakeholder is there. I would never say that IGF isn't multi-stakeholder, but not completely, not fully. It has a ways to develop. And WGIG does give an example, does sort of point a way of it can work. And we've seen other examples where it can work. It was an interesting example to me. I came in as a techie, knew nothing about internet governance, knew a little bit about philosophy, didn't know what ICANN, I knew what ICANN was, but nothing about it. And I learned a lot through that process and found it really quite valuable, and it obviously changed my life. One of the other things, and I want to point out, and I'm not sure it even fits in this thing, but there was one feature of the Working Group on Internet Governance that we've lost. We had Frank March, our secretary, our main writer, sitting in the room with us while he was writing, talking to us, asking about this paragraph or that paragraph. That goes even further on the notion that now we sort of contribute our comments into a bucket somewhere, and somebody may look at them, may not look at them, may include a word or two, but not. We actually sat there irritating this poor, lovely man, saying, no, you got to change that word. No, I need this paragraph. No, and he actually bore with it. And so while we're all talking about the wonder of WGIG, I really wanted to bring up the wonderful example of Frank. So I think that for the foreseeable future, we have to work on a way to combine the two, because governments are not going to give up their multilateral insofar as they can get beyond unilateral, but they're not going to give it up in any time. And we can't afford to give up a multi-stakeholder model. So the two of them have to work either in contention, which is not that useful, or figure out how to operate together. And I think we've got some motion in that direction. I think WGIG started it. I think it's always good to go back to reading not only the report, but as several people said, the background report. There's so much in there to play with, and I recommend it to any student. So hopefully that answered my part of the question.
Thank you for that, Avri, and also thank you for mentioning Frank. Frank March played a very important role. I think without him, we wouldn't have been able to produce a report. And invite you to share a thought on him, because he passed away sadly a couple of years back. That was very sad to learn. He was really an important help for us to produce the report. And the last speaker on this segment, and thank you also, Avri, for moving away from the dichotomy multi-stakeholder versus multilateral. No, I think it was the Brazilians who always make the point there is no false dichotomy between the two. They have to work together, and thank you also for underlying that. Charles, you also put your name down for that, and can you also say if there's anything to report on what's happening in the Zoom room? Please, Charles.
Thank you very much, Marcos. In fact, I think what I will say is I will start by saying that I was still young in the internet governance sphere, not in age. In age, I'm still young in age. Anyway, so but it was really a wonderful experience to sit, as my colleagues mentioned, with the different stakeholders. And to give an example maybe different of what my colleague mentioned, I mean a specific example. Let's go to my current practice. You know, the intellectual property was somehow problematic, you can say, during that time in specific. And everybody knows the UDRP, for example. I think without the multi-stakeholderism, we couldn't have this uniform dispute resolution policy on the internet. Why? Because, as everybody knows, it started with ICANN, WIPO government, ICANN, different technical body, we can say, private sector, lawyers, and the civil society were an important part in it to find a way how to find these different solutions for the disputes on the internet domain names in specific. So I just would like to mention this to have some additional of what my colleagues already covered, I think, in general. So, and I agree, maybe the last sentence I will say, I will not talk a lot, I will concentrate on remote moderation today. What Avri mentioned, I think multilateralism will stay too. So I think we need to find this combination, how to keep the multi-stakeholderism, which is very important, bottom up and so on, and to be able to find a way to work with the different multilateral mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think there was a time when there was a real antagonism between multi-stakeholder and multilateral. And there was sort of the technical community in particular said, oh, multilateral is bad and multi-stakeholder is good. And I think that doesn't lead us anywhere. And as working for a small country, for the diplomatic service of Switzerland, we always believe in multilateralism because it protects the smaller countries. Multilateralism is always better than unilateralism. And I think in this current global situation, we really all need to feel strengthened through multilateralism, which does not include multi-stakeholderism. And with that, can we move on to the last segment, which is essentially looking to the IGF. Has the IGF delivered what we had hoped for? And it really built very much on WGIG. We had, it was mentioned before, we had our closed session on the Chatham House rule, but we always opened up in between, and the day before we had an open consultation. And we thought that could be the model also for the IGF, and the IGF very much built on that model. So has the IGF actually lived up to our expectations, and what should we do to move forward? And we have two remote speakers here, Baher Esmat, who works for ICANN, and Carlos. They're all remotely, they're both remotely, and then we have Jovan and Vittoria who are here in the room. Can we move to Baher? Baher, are you online?
I am. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear. Excellent.
All right. Thank you, Marcus. And hello, everyone. I'm pleased to take part in this session and to contribute to the discussion alongside my WIGIG colleagues. The IGF, and today we're almost 19 years into this global forum. I think the IGF has been, the primary global multi-stakeholder forum for discussing internet governance issues. It kind of, filled a gap that was identified by the WIGIG members 20 years ago. It provided a space for discussion, for open discussion among all stakeholders, from governments, private sector, civil society, technical community, and academia, all on equal footing. It has also contributed to a very important element, especially to those coming from the developing world, which is the capacity building aspect. And I think today with the numerous, regional, national IGFs and other similar platforms from, school and internet governance and so forth, this, shows the impact of the IGF over the years. Another point I'd like to point to very quickly, and I think some of the previous speakers have touched on, which is how the IGF has evolved over time. I think the IGF has been, continuously evolving over the past years. We've seen this in many aspects, from trying to improve its outcomes in the forms of whether messages or reports and so on. But also in the form of topics and issues being addressed during the meetings. And as someone noted earlier, this debate between internet governance, digital governance, and those definitions. I think because of the way the WIGIG approached the issue of defining internet governance, and we've seen the definition itself is broad enough to sort of encompass a lot of issues, most of which were not even foreseen. They did not exist 20 years ago. So the IGF over the years has evolved in its agenda, and we've seen many topics that were not in the WIGIG radar in 2004, 2005. AI is the most popular, but there are many others. And I think this evolution is one of the key characteristics of the IGF. The other characteristics that has been debated over the years is the non-decision making nature of the IGF. And while some have debated that this is one of the weaknesses of the IGF, personally I believe it's one of the strengths, and I think it was not a bug in the system. I think it was intentionally by design to be made as again an open and a non-decision making forum to allow everyone to contribute and to participate on equal footing. Now looking to the future, and this is my last point. I think as we continue to consider how to evolve the IGF, how to improve and strengthen the IGF, I believe that the financial stability and sustainability of the IGF is key, and for the IGF to continue to serve as the global Internet Governance Forum. But I think we need the minds of all the participants and the contributors to the IGF to come together and to consider more innovative ideas to sort of guarantee or at least offer or put forward a sustainable model for funding and supporting the IGF to continue its role at the global level. Thank you.
Yeah. And the next speaker is Carlos Afonso. Will you join us? Are you joining us from Rio? Carlos?
Yes. I am joining from Rio. Let me turn the camera on. Yes, I am there.
It's great to see you, Carlos.
So I find it a bit complicated to find new things related to the report that we did in 2005. I remember Avery mentioned a very important thing that Frank Marsh did a beautiful work of patience, of listening to us and trying to synthesize everything. It was really great, and the report is much, much more than the definition. I think we did a definition that was to stand the test of time. Simple enough to stand the test of time, but it's still very simple in relation to all the complex issues we are facing. But the report was so important because it identified 4 key public policy areas, which are still the main public policy areas, whatever the development of internet and these 4 policy areas we managed to detail in 13 issues, fundamental issues, which are valid until today. So I think that more than the definition or the report is a very good reference, which the report itself is standing the test of time. And this is great. I think this was the main contribution we could do in that group at the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Great to see you. Now back to the room, and we have Jovan and Vittoria who also address this issue. Jovan first.
Thank you, Marcus. Well, it's a party time in a way, and I don't know if it is good to bring some controversies, but since we will have 4 days to chat in the corridors and during the coffee break, I will propose 3 points about the future of IGF, which may require the great contribution for all people in the room and the former members of the WGIG. The first one, and thank you for parking it, is the false dichotomy, multi-stakeholder versus multilateral. If you look carefully in the Tunis compromise, you will see that IGF is masterpiece of compromise by putting the multi-stakeholder body under the UN umbrella. Both camps got something. Pro-governmental camp got, for the first time, IG issues in the UN context. Multi-stakeholder camp got multi-stakeholder participation. That formula, fortunately or unfortunately, will have to be revisited. And that cannot stay as fixed in the stone. As executive director of the UN high-level panel, I try to argue for IGF+. And one point, and I will now open controversies, is that I argued that the famous, very controversial, big elephant in the room question of enhanced cooperation should be brought as one of the track on the first day of IGF, together with governments, civil society, businesses, discussing. We may not call it enhanced cooperation, we may call it enhanced coordination, just to have it smoother consumption, but I never understood why it wasn't possible. I understand political positioning elements of it, more diplomatic, but in its core, it was very simple solution to put that last bit from the Tunis formula, bit of salt, which I think British diplomat on the 18th of November during the negotiation brought as a solution to find the package. That's controversial, and I'm sure there will be many questions. Its second point is capacity building, and that was a great achievement. And here is a personal story. When I started doing IG, my friends asked me, what are you doing? And then when I told them what I was doing, they were calling me to fix their printer, to install their software and these things. I usually did it. It's great to help people, but then it inspired me to write the book, Introduction to Internet Governance. And fast forward, few months ago, I wrote the last book 8 years ago, and I said there is no need anymore, but people convinced me, and I'm preparing 8th edition, which will be presented on Wednesday. And the question was, should I call it internet governance?
Wednesday.
And you will see, if you come to that discussion, there is a reason to keep it as internet governance. Issues are the same. They're not asking me anymore to install their printer. They're now asking me about where their knowledge is, who is basically monopolizing their knowledge. Discussion moved on. And that sort of dynamics, by me writing the book every year, and now revisiting this book, is a great sort of diary of the Internet Governance Forum and its achievement. And third point, which Bill mentioned, is extremely important. It is modus operandi of the IGF. We sometimes underestimate that. And I'll give you one point, again, personal story. 15 years ago, I went to the IGF, I think, well, you will find the date, but it was. And you know how it goes. You come the first day and you have a big ambitions, great speakers, great workshops. You want to follow it all. And after the first morning, you realize that you cannot do it, and you end up in the cafeteria meeting friends, chatting. And there is always that feeling of the missed opportunities, or I missed something. This is how DIPLO's reporting started. First with humans, our former students, interns, and now it's helped with the AI. And that incremental development of new methodologies, now when everything is now and here, we have AI, let's install AI agents. But that incremental in all aspects of IGF work, capacity building, bringing consensus, involving other people. From our side, this reporting, I think it's a great legacy of the IGF, and on that legacy, we should build the future of IGF. Therefore, 3 points. First, revisit Tunis formula. We need to do it. Second, continue capacity building. That's one of the great achievements of IGF. And third one, talk more about the way of modus operandi of the IGF. It's completely, I would say, we are too shy about it. And this is an untold story of high relevance for the broader governance and other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. And last speaker is Vittoria.
Thank you. So as the former youngest member of the WIGIG and the least diplomats, I think I will have to also stir some controversy. Well, I think I think we're really at the point in time where we need to think at the future of the IGF. So we need also to look at what worked and what didn't work. So maybe I'd start from the first half of the problem, which is the practical way of working of the IGF. And I think in the overall, we like this event. So we continue coming. So I think everybody finds value in the IGF. I think it should continue. I think it could be better. I mean, especially this year, I only meet people that are disappointed because they've been trying to propose a panel or workshop for several years now, and they never get accepted even if they meet all the criteria, because there's, I guess, a sheer lack of space. I mean, there's a limit to how many you can have. But we have to find a better way of mobilizing these energies, because otherwise there's people, especially outside of the existing, regular participants that come, try several years, they get disappointed, they go away and say, oh, the IGF is just a smoke, just for the insiders, just whatever. And the other thing is, I think that will also solve this problem is a much better working of the national IGFs, especially. Our experience with the Italian IGF is terrible. Basically, 7 years ago, it was captured by the then government, and it was used by a politician for self-promotion. There were no meetings anymore. I mean, it didn't even happen for several years. And then now it's still in the hands of the government, and it's a new government. You know, in 6 years we have had like 7 governments of multiple colors. But still every government is keeping it, and now they're organizing maybe one this year. Again, it's multi-stakeholder in the sense that there's multiple ministries involved. And that's all. So I think that we need to address these kind of things, because it could make the credibility, especially the bottom-up process, much better. But then the other part of the question is about, the role of the IGF, and the question in the program is, did it meet the purpose that we thought it would meet? And to be honest, I think that, well, the narrow part of the definition worked well, and I think that nobody's really unhappy with the governance of the technical resources. The broadest part of the definition didn't work very well. So we are now at a stage, 20 years ago, we believed the internet would bring democracy and welfare, and it was an instrument for progress. And nowadays, I already quoted this. 1 month ago, there was a survey in the UK, and they asked the young people, would you live better off if the internet didn't exist? And half of them said yes. So half of them think that the world would be better without the internet. And this is really, really terrible for us that, work to create it and make it a mass instrument. And I think what failed is, we were naive. We thought that by putting everyone together, we would be able to address the economic and social questions. And this didn't happen, especially because of the private sector, I have to say. We're part of the private sector. The people that could make money out of breaking down the internet and turning it into walled gardens, they just went on and made money. And nobody could stop them because we had no stick. We had carrots to come in, but we had no stick to force them. And this is exactly what caused now the transition of countries and regions like the European Union that have always been in favor of multi-stakeholderism and open governance and whatever, to a new, like a hard jurisdiction, hard law approach. And this is why I think we were getting now also pressure from multilateralism. And to be honest, I don't like the idea of more multilateralism, but I also don't like the idea of continuing with a few very big companies that are doing whatever they want over the internet. And so maybe the national level will be more important. I don't have an answer on how to build a new balance between all the stakeholders. But indeed, there needs to be a reflection, which I think includes the IGF as a continuing entity, but also takes into account that by now, governments really have the need to put some hard rules over global businesses, and that this is the tension that is not going away. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vittorio, and also thank you for asking tough questions. I see there are already reactions. Charles, do you have?
Maybe Aisha first, but there is a question online. Yeah.
Well, why don't you go ahead with the question?
Online? Okay. In fact, there was some discussions, and Bill already answered some of them, but I think one of the questions still online without a response, maybe, from Shaima Akhtar, Chairperson, Bangladesh Women IGF. Given the rise of AI, surveillance technologies, and the dominance of platform monopolies, should we now push for a more intersectional and right-based approach in defining digital governance, one that genuinely centers the lived realities of women, youth, and marginalized communities?
Thank you. And there were hands up, Aisha and Avri. Yes, please.
Just briefly, I wanted to build a bit on what has been said by other members here. I think that the IGF is a unique, Marcus, you've said this, a watering hole. And I really think that the way it is, it has evolved over 20 years. There are many ways in which each year it's a different experience. And I think that the range of stakeholders as it has expanded in all of the different stakeholder groups. So as we look forward, I think it's encouraging the topics that are important to people to be taken up here, whether in the workshops or in the main sessions. And I was very pleased this year to see resilience being there, because I believe that resilience is a challenge of the future, and it's not just about how to survive one shock. It's about how do you build the capacity across the layers, and how is this worked on across stakeholder groups to raise awareness about it. Now that, unfortunately, for the young people who don't wish that the internet didn't exist, it does. And our economies, our political systems, social, everything, we depend on this wonderful thing called the internet. So I just wanted to say that now I think an issue for everyone to come around together on is also resilience. How do we keep this being as reliable and secure as possible? And lastly, a shout out to you, Jovan. I'm still waiting for the new edition of the puzzle. Do you remember your puzzle?
Yes, it's coming. It's even more complicated.
Yes, thank you, Aisha and Avri.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I want to thank the comment that came in. And one of the things I want to remind us all is there was a time in the IGF where we couldn't even mention the word or the notion of rights. of people, that we had long, long battles about, my God, rights belongs to some other department within the UN. You can't talk about rights. And fortunately, we're not doing a lot of it. And so the questioner is right. When can we start talking about them more? And any notion we have that IGF is bottom up is something that we should quit pretending. It is not. It hasn't been. And yeah, I'd love to see it bottom up, but it isn't. So, in others, you don't get to be bottom up by having an occasional consultation that you ignore. So that is. We are a tribe of groups. We come here in our tribes, and we argue for our points. But we've been told what points we're going to be able to argue from by those who control it. So I love the IGF. I love to see it continue, and I'd really like to see it become bottom up.
Thank you. Yeah, Charles?
Not from me. Alejandro raising his hand.
Oh, Alejandro, want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Complementing what Avery has just said, looking to the future of the IGF, another type of feedback I get is that we must make sure that it doesn't become like RightsCon winter. We have to make sure that we engage in these discussions substantively, the people that are decision makers and not only commercial representatives of businesses and higher level officials that don't stay apart in their own corrals, but we really get to have this conversation substantively. It has to be bottom up, but it has to reach whoever else is in the geometry. I won't say they are on the top, but they are at the center in effective political decision making, and we have to make sure that there's an engagement with them. Otherwise, it's too much corridor and too little really multi-stakeholder engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also like to open the discussion to the floor. There are microphones on the side, so the easiest way would be if those who have a comment or a question just align themselves behind one of the microphones. Yes, Raul, please.
Since there is maybe it's better to give priority to that.
Okay, please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First and foremost, my name is James Olufui, Africa ICT Alliance, been in the ecosystem for quite a while. I want to salute all foreigners. Great job you've done, and we are still at it. First and foremost, I want to talk about the last point made about bottom-up. Actually, we need to understand that it has always been top-down. Always been top-down. So it's going to take a while before it becomes a bottom-up. Not as if ICANN. No, ICANN by design is bottom-up. And so we need patience, we need perseverance, and we need to continuously engage and talk about it. And that brings me to the second point about multilateralism and multi-stakeholderism. I love multi-stakeholderism. I love it. It makes life easy. Everybody claim ownership, have ownership, for the common issue for the society. So it's the way to go. But I have an experience too that I will just share briefly. During the weekend, that is working group on the Enhanced Cooperation, a representative accused us in the private sector that we wanted to take over the work of government. So I had to make an explanation that indeed, no, we are helping the government to fulfill their objective, the responsibility to the citizens. So, and after that explanation, I think the accusation stopped. I never heard about it anymore. So I think we need to continuously engage and explain clearly our intention. Our intention is a better society, information society where nobody is left behind. And when we all work together, we will achieve together, and the government will achieve their purposes. Then thirdly, this is a question now with regard to Yuan. Yuan made a very important, at least comment about the issue of consensus. Like I recall, the conclusion of WIGET in 2018, January 2018, we could not have consensus because we're expecting 100% consensus. But if what is said now is what we adopted, that is rough consensus, okay, or near consensus, 99% consensus, maybe we'll have had a kind of firm report that says this is the outcome of this group. So the question is, if we had had that report based on what you have said, do you think the follow-up summit of the future will still have happened? Because by July, the Secretary General set up the high-level panel on digital cooperation, and that led us to this because the WIGED failed. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we go to the microphone behind, and please introduce yourself?
Yep, thank you. Isra Rosas with the Internet Society. Just a brief question, and Juan hinted at it a little bit. If you were to give a single piece of advice to the WIS plus FEDENCO facilitators on how to reach or generate consensus for this process, for the outcome document they are drafting, what would it be that you recommend to them? That's the only question that I have.
Okay, that's a short question, and I'll take it back to our panelists. And now, Henriette. Yeah.
Thanks, Marcus. Henriette Esterhuizen, past MAG member and past MAG chair. Do you think the IGF is ready to actually handle controversial issues? I think we've spent so many times, I support what Jovan is saying, this fear of putting enhanced cooperation on the agenda. Surely the IGF is mature enough now to be able to do that. This fear of putting issues that are controversial, such as fair tax payment, on the agenda by big tech companies. Do you feel the IGF is mature enough on the, to be able to do that? And I say that having worked, for example, as someone said, it took years before we could actually talk about human rights at the IGF. It took years before we could talk about LGBT issues at the IGF. Is the IGF finally mature enough to have a strategy which is including and facilitating debate on controversy, as opposed to a strategy which is based on avoiding any kind of risk or controversial topic?
All important questions. And again, back to the second microphone, please. Yes.
This Bertrand over there.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nandini. I'm from IT for Change India and part of the Civil Society Coalition Global Digital Justice Forum. So the panel made a lot of very insightful observations about how the relationship between multilateralism and multi-stakeholderism should not be seen as antagonistic when we want the democratic governance bottom line. My question is, in recent years, we have seen a lot of digital governance issues, data governance issues in particular, being taken out of a democratic space and into very closed-door multilateral spaces, such as digital trade negotiations. So how does the panel think that, we could use the digital cooperation mechanisms available to us to counter the view? Because even as the GDC processes for data governance are ongoing, we still see those issues and many new bottom lines being sealed in trade deals and sometimes even regional closed-door plurilateral deals. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And Bertrand, please.
Good morning. My name is Bertrand de la Chapelle. I'm the Executive Director of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. 2 comments. One, I'm very happy that both Juan and Jovan and others make a reference to the methodology and the way to work. What was striking from everything I understood from the working of the WIGIG was this interaction between people, and Avri was mentioning it as well. And indeed, the role of the Secretariat, the capacity to make a summary and to present not only a one version that is watered down to get consensus, but something that says there are different options. That was extremely important. The methodology was important, and it could be taken into account for the IGF itself, because as Jordan Carter was saying in another session earlier, the IGF is not supposed to make decisions. It is, in my view, to help frame the issues, to bring the different actors around one topic, so that instead of having different sessions addressing the different point of views on the same topic, the different actors can have the kind of interaction that you had within the WIGIG. And second, a very quick question. The WIGIG was a way out of some sort of roadblock at the end of the first phase of the WSIS. It created what all of you have said, and what I believe is still today the most multi-stakeholder process that has taken place in 20 years. We are now stuck with the question of what is going to be the future of the IGF, and I personally do not believe that the WSIS plus 20 process until December is going to solve the question of what are the next stages. So my question is, do you think that there would be a benefit in having a sort of new exercise of that sort, a new WIGIG after December, or call it, as we were discussing yesterday, a CSTD working group, whatever multi-stakeholder discussion on revision of the mandate of the IGF after 20 years and institutionalization of this organization that now should become a mature organization with funding and processes.
Thank you. Food for thought. And I see there are various colleagues who put their hand up. I think Raul was first, then Jovan.
Yes. Alejandro.
Alejandro was already in the waiting room. Yes. Alejandro, please.
Thank you. Quick replies to Israel and to Henriette, and part of it has already been given by Bertrand. Consensus is not necessarily an objective of the IGF. It's more like conveying of different views, reminding us ourselves also that it has to be non-duplicative. So if there's a forum like satellites and the ITU or what have you, then it's better to continue the discussion there, but after framing and bringing in new stakeholders that would be otherwise excluded. And to Henriette, and I think you'll agree, the IGF is mature for lots of much more controversial issues. The ones that are not mature enough are some of the stakeholders, some, I would say, particularly some governments that would prefer to continue power games in closed venues, or let's say government-only venues where the politics is more like, I'll trade you some internet governance for some oil or some water rights. So we have to make sure that they are as mature as the forum. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we have Raul.
Yes. Thank you, Marcus. I cannot address all the points that were brought, so I will pick a couple of them. That's with regard to the maturity of IGF. I think that's aligned with what Alejandro said. I think, yes, the IGF is mature enough. And I remember that in 2013, IGF was the first place in the world where we had an open discussion about surveillance after Snowden revelation. And it was a high-level panel. I think that it was very good. Yeah, and I organized it.
It was one of the most difficult moderations.
Yeah.
I thought you were my friend.
So the point is, I think that's the challenge is the commitment of the stakeholders to have those discussions. So I think that the tool is good and it's mature enough, but I think that the point of failure is the commitment of stakeholders to come and engage. And to be honest, and I think that all of us agree on this point, this is not the best moment for international cooperation. So I don't think that we can be very optimistic, at least in the short term. And that's it. With regard to the call that Israel asked about the what we would suggest to the facilitators, I'm not sure if you were talking about the work toward the December recommendations or the implementation or the recommendation themselves. But I think that the solution is exactly the point is exactly the same, and it's what Bertrand mentioned. I think with regard to the work of the toward the WSIS plus 20 evaluation, I think that the process has not been participative enough. And it would have been good to have an exercise like WIGIG and to evaluate and make the recommendations. But we still have time to include that as part of the recommendation for the future. So that I think that's the idea could be the same. Thank you.
Thank you. And Wolfgang and Avri as well? Yes. Okay.
I also.
Okay. Okay, we got. Well, let's just take a round pan. Well, we'll start with Wolfgang. He was first.
Okay, yeah. The short answer to Bertrand's question is yes, certainly. Because we will see in December a situation where there is no consensus. And always, the best thing in such a situation, delegate the open questions to a working group. So in Germany, we say, if you nicht mehr weiter weißt, dann gründe einen Arbeitskreis. So that means if you are in a helpless situation, establish a working group and wait for the future, because this is not the time to reach an agreement. That's my, pessimistic preview for December. But I want to comment on another issue. When we discussed the IGF and the mandate, there was really the intention not to give the IGF a decision-making capacity, to give it only for discussion, because this has opened the mind, opened the ears, opened the eyes for everybody on equal footing. Everybody can talk to everybody. So, but you need, at least in the multi-stakeholder context, four for a tango. So, and that means if we didn't want to have a governmental controlled internet, but we are also rejecting a business controlled internet. That's why, the academic, the civil society community, the technical community was seen as an important part to bring all perspectives. What we see now is indeed, that we are coming in a situation where we have either the tech oligarchs or the governments who want to manage this. And, when Mark Zuckerberg made the announcement early January that he will stop content moderation, my first reaction was Mark Zuckerberg should come to the IGF and to explain his decision to the broader internet community. So I think this is what we need. We have to have the decision makers on the table for discussions, and then they can go home and can make the decisions where they have a mandate in their own corporation. But it's part of the accountability system also for the rulers of the internet of today. And this meets exactly what Vittorio has said. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one participant behind the microphone. Are you queuing behind the microphone? No, okay.
There is
hello.
Two behind the microphone, and then we go around here. But can you be very short? 1 minute?
Yes, sure. This is Hadi Al-Minyawi and following up with some of the controversial questions and following up on and hearing this discussion. So the IGF has been discussed is a forum to discuss issues and frame the issues in order to be discussed in a more formal way and come up with decisions and recommendations in the ITU. And that brings a question. So why would governments actually participate or take a role or be interested even in the discussions taking place in the Internet Governance Forum? And so I've heard others saying, governments would like to manage the IGF. Why would they be even interested in managing the IGF? If all what we do here is like discussing the issues, framing them, and then moving them to the ITU in order to be discussed in a multilateral form, and there the decisions are made. So, yeah, this is my question. Thank you.
Sebastian?
Usually I come to a microphone and I speak in French, but it seems that it's not possible here. Sébastien Bachelet, Isaac France and Euralo. I just wanted to ask two questions. The first one, how many government representatives are in the room? Because they will learn a lot. The second question, do you want already that we book the castle for you for the next discussion? Thank you.
Thank you.
French castle.
Okay, now we go back to the panel, and we have 5 minutes left. So, okay, we start with Avri.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. I had actually, Sebastian, that same question. I was wondering, looking around, trying to figure out how many might be government and such. I won't ask for a raise of hands, though I'd love to be able to ask for a raise of hands. But yeah, we have a couple at the table. Yeah, one. But anyway, I wanted to also come back to people talking about the models. And I think one of the things that happened is with Working Group on Internet Governance, to get back to that, the whole discussion about multi-stakeholder and multi-stakeholderism and multi-stakeholder models really began in earnest. There were certainly examples of it before then, but the model discussion. And at this point, we've gotten where we really have to recognize that the model that we have at the IGF is really just one example of a way to do it. We now have many other models. We have to do more work, and it could even be a good thing to do at the IGF of understanding the pervasive number of models. The other thing we have to understand is one of the things that was talked about was IGF does not make a decision. There are multi-stakeholder models that do make decisions. For example, ICANN was brought up. But there you have a case of marrying sort of a multi-stakeholder, bottom-up policy making with a top-down corporation doing its thing, and that marriage itself is really quite a fascinating thing that needs studying. So there are an immense number of models, and my last thing was on advice. It's patient perseverance.
Good. Thank you. Juan, which very short.
Yes, yeah. I didn't want to talk about it. I want to react to what you said because maybe I'm the only government representative in the room. And I can say that why there's no interest of government to come to IGF. And one of the things that we discuss in WIGI, the roles and responsibility of stakeholders. But we need to define the roles and responsibility of the processes that are surrounding WISIS. And that is not very well understood. I found out by experience that the IGF is fantastic as an agenda setter, as framing the issues. And maybe I'm not agreeing with Avery. I think we have still, it can be improved the bottom up, but still there's some bottom up because the workshops are proposed from the bottom. And also now we have the NRI, the national and regional IGF. So the IGF is good to bring to the table problems and issues that may not be aware, not even by the governments of their own countries themselves, because of the candor in which it's presented during the IGF, especially if you've been in the IGF that was being held in developing countries, the two where there were in Brazil, the one in Mexico, the one in Kenya, when they're, okay, so I think that's a good thing. So I think that what we need, Bertrand, after this process of the WSIS plus 20, is to really define what is the role of the IGF. The IGF has to be the agenda setter. That's the role of the IGF. And in the WSIS forum, the action. And
thank you. There may be others. Okay. A very last word.
Maybe quick comment from the Jameson, why governments are not coming. They are not finding answers to their questions. That's it. 193 member states, easier than few thousand members of the IGF. Now, we should not do government bashing. As Jimson said, we should explain why they can benefit. Bottom up, let's use it with AI. This is now a crucial battle. Can we preserve our knowledge through bottom-up AI? Not even internet governance. This is critical battle which is happening now and here. Are we ready to start these discussions?
Last 50 seconds.
That's it.
Bill?
All right. Well, obviously not enough time to say anything. On controversial questions, Henriette, I would just say, remember how much time it took to talk about so-called critical internet resources. The first couple of years of IGF, everybody was so stressed, we couldn't even begin to have the conversation. One way to strengthen the ability of the IGF to actually take on these issues is to give us a permanent mandate. If everybody would stop worrying that somehow the mandate would be snatched back from us if we do anything wrong, then maybe we could get into things more. I also want to just say quickly, the woman who mentioned the trade questions, trade has been brought up in the IGF. It's been very hard to talk about trade issues in the IGF because trade people don't understand this space or care much about it, and often it's hard for people in this space to get their head around how things work in trade. Last point on the new group thing. I think less than a new group to talk about the IGF's future narrowly. We need a group that thinks about the relationship between internet governance, data governance, AI governance, and so on. Digital governance. There's a lot of confusion. There's just an enormous amount of conceptual gunk out there, and this translates into proposals to do things like changing the name of the IGF and so on. And I think we need to get these issues sorted out and take into account what's already been discussed and learned by people out there in the field who do these things professionally, among other things. Oh, by the way, I can't think of one thing the ITU has done on internet governance. I don't see the IGF as just making inputs to the ITU.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for contributing, the participants and the panelists. And what you could see is that 20 years after, we still talk to each other and we're still friends. So that is a lasting legacy. Please join me giving all the panelists a big hand, and thank you all.
Bravo, Bill.